Yeah, so good morning, it's Tuesday morning, April 2nd. Lucky, we made it through yesterday.
I know.
April Fool's Day. And but we have gentleman Winsky
Lipsky.
with us from the House, and I thought we would go through the timber passed bill. And so before we start, Jed, we'll introduce ourselves and don't want you to forget us, our needs. So,
Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Irene Robertson in North Dakota Fairfax.
Brian Campy in Bennington County.
Richie Westman is working on some appropriation thing. It's got to do. I'm Bobby Starr, and want to certainly welcome you to the committee. This bill, when it got over here, originally went to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The chair of that committee felt their plate was pretty full, and that a lot of this timber trespass stuff happens on woodland or ag land, and a lot of farmers own and lumber people on this woodland. So he asked us to take a look at it, review it, and work on it. So this is our first attempt.
Well, thank you, Chairman Starr, and thank you, committee, and thank you, your administrator, for the invitation. For the record, my name is Jed Lipsky. I'm the representative from the Lamoille 1 district, which is Stowe. And for background, I've been a professional independent logging contractor for over 50 years. I am a certified LEAP logger. I am a certified master logger, certified by the Trust to Conserve Northeast Forests. I am a member of the Vermont Forest Products Association. I'm a board member of the I'm a member of the newly expanded professional logging contractors at the Northeast. And I am a board member of the Northeastern Loggers Association, which is actually headquartered in Old Forge, New York, but includes Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, and all of the New England states, and New Jersey. So I've been active, not just professionally, but as an advocate for active forest management. And so that's some of my background. But the bill before you, which we refer to as H614, is an act to protect victims, landowners who have experienced what's now called land fraud or timber trespass. There's a difference between unintentional timber trespass, where there may be poorly marked boundary line and a contractor might have cut over a boundary, not intentionally, confronts their mistake and negotiates a appropriate reparation with either the forester representing a landowner or landowner. But this is targeting a whole nother class of crime that that's actually done a great deal of damage, not moderate damage, to landowners, both emotionally and financially. And I could give you an example of this, or a few if you'd like. And Bobby, if you'll just guide me, I can walk you through the bill. I can talk about some examples of why I think this is important, and I'll take guidance from you. If you want 5 minutes, 3 minutes, or 15 minutes, I'm happy to
Well,
try to make our case.
we need to understand the severity of it and the differences like intentional and non-intentional, and what you folks have done over on the health side. Well, though then we can report, the findings and stuff.
Thank you. So I'm gonna start with a background to give you sort of a picture of what it's like to be a victim.
Yeah.
And also how frustrating it's been. And more background, I think, transparency and accuracy matters in everything, but I was approached, I was actually at a meeting with the professional log contractors of the Northeast, and we zoomed into a meeting with the speaker. And I was in a pickup truck, and there were the executive director of the Northeast Forest Products, the Northeast Logger Association was there, and also a logger from Orange County, who was a former deputy commissioner of forest products protection. And when we reached out to the speaker and her staff, she allowed, well, what are you doing about timber trespass? And that may have been in September when this conversation came. And after the Zoom ended, a conversation ensued. Not that none of us didn't know what timber trespass was, but the crisis that had been brought to the speaker. And that was a representative from, I think it was Marshfield, Plainfield, Rep Mahali. And we immediately reached out to him and wanted to get an understanding of why this was in the forefront. In fact, he talked about some experiences he's had from frustrated constituents. And in one case, there's a constituent for 6.5 years now, had his land logged in violation of a verbal agreement, never received payment for any of the timber taken off his land. And he had 2 abutters, one on each side of it. They all agreed that this would be a good thing and a source of revenue. The first property owner who was harvested on received payment for maybe 1 or 2 loads, and the next loads were never paid for. This other complainant had at least 10 loads, log trailer loads, taken off his property, never received a penny. And the third abutter experienced the same thing. So they went to the local police. This is out of our jurisdiction. They went to FPR. We do not have the staff to handle this. So they went to the state police, same story. They went to the state's attorney, same story. And if I told you what it's like, and these are all older folks, have been managing this part of their survival, fixed incomes, some ex-veterans. But it was another example of someone up in your neck of the woods, Chairman Starr, in Orleans County, who was an out-of-state owner, came back, found his land stripped, went to the local authorities, and he said, I think I know who it is. He's a neighbor. And the local authorities asked the neighbor, did you cut this person's trees? Yes, I did. did you have permission to go on his land and cut his trees? No, I didn't. Did you ever remunerate or pay this owner for any of the wood that you took? No, I did not. So full confessions and zero action from any law enforcement. And there were other, I'll give you one other example, just so you can understand the sort of viciousness of these kind of actions. There was another out-of-state owner who had their land in current use appraisal, assessment program, came and found that, a portion way beyond what was approved was, harvested as well. And these people had the funds to hire an attorney, take the perpetrator to court, and found a favorable result in the court, which not only charged the timber thief, a triple stumpage value.
Yeah.
And to this day, that person has recovered not $1 US. Why does this happen? And these aren't the only 3 examples in Vermont. We took hours, days of testimony on this in our committee. And there is a theme. And as I stated, some of my resume and history as a professional logging contractor, I want to state for the record that most logging contractors that I've spent my life working with have great integrity, great responsibility for managing the resource and the environment and water quality and wildlife habitat and songbird habitat and outdoor recreation. We have a lot on our shoulders today. And in order to survive in tough climate, resiliency times, as well as economic times, it's a lot of responsibility. But as an organization or as a community, both the Vermont Forest Products Association and the Professional Logging Contractors for the Northeast all supported this bill. There is a scourge. There are criminals all over the world. Our credit cards get hacked or everything. There's no limit, but this is something that's been going on far too long. And I just want to point out, we had state police, we had FDR, and we finally had the Attorney General's office and the state, district attorney office, state's attorneys, all come in and testify. And they all believe that the wording of this bill, land fraud, sounds like a weird concept, but in this case, it clearly ties an additional area of fraud to intentional timber trespass and gives the responsibility for the Attorney General office to prosecute.
So that the office of the Attorney General shall consult or see with the Department of Forest and Parks, but you're actually giving the authority to prosecute right to the fraud division of the Attorney General's office.
Yes, so with that background, which was not brief, I could walk you through the bill as sort of a summary section by section if you would like. This is, and I just want to acknowledge that Rep. Mahali, who I referenced earlier, it came into the room, and frankly credit him with the fact his advocacy to stop this scourge. And the scourge is being promulgated by predator criminals. So they target individuals that are older, absentee, or most vulnerable.
maybe, and Mark, are you limited on your time this morning?
I'm okay until I get yanked back into appropriations to vote, but I don't know when that is.
So you think you got time to sit through this, or do you want to give us a little bit on appropriations bill and go back to committee?
Why don't I speak briefly before you go, before you go through the bill
Yeah, then,
itself, if that's okay with Representative.
then
It'd
you,
be my honor. Thank you.
then you can be excused.
Or I can sit here till I get yanked. It's more fun here.
That's a comfortable chair.
I don't know if you know.
No, I actually have not personally said hello to anybody. I recognize the face.
Yeah, Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Ryan, doesn't meet you, for you, I know, because we're in the same class.
Oh.
Can't be in Bennington County, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm
I really was so much younger.
Star from Orleans County.
A pleasure.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm Mark Mahaly for the record. I represent Plainfield, Marshfield, and Callis. I got hauled into a meeting of about a half dozen of my constituents and discovered a problem that I frankly didn't even know existed, which is rather pervasive predatory fraud against people. They're very careful who they pick. For example, people who have foresters, because they're, they have land that in current use, they tend to stay away from who they pick people. They're very good at it. And they knock on your door and say, we're in the neighborhood. And it's such a Vermont thing, to trust. And, people say, can we, well, yeah, how about that bunch of trees over there? And they'll say, okay. And then they'll go cut them down and stay and cut a lot more. And then say, oh, but we'll pay you. And sometimes when people say, get off my property, they threaten them physically. And they don't pay them ever. And then they get, sometimes, as you know, it takes money to hire a lawyer and go through that. And a lot of people just don't have it. They sue, and as you heard, they're successful. They get a judgment. And not only that, there have been actions against these people over the years where they have fines. Well, when you get fined in Vermont, when you don't pay, it gets turned over to a collection agency. The collection agency sent a nasty letter. These people just don't pay attention to that. They don't pay, they don't pay their fines, they don't pay their judgments, and it works. And so, the only thing I want to add to what Representative Lipsky said, or at least what I heard he said this, is I really made an attempt here because of the advice I got from loggers, wonderful people. I mean, really honorable, great people. I resisted effort to Christmas tree this with requirements that loggers register, that they license, that things like that. There are various things out there to regulate the logging community. And I just felt like in this bill, why punish all the good actors because of the few bad actors? And so the bill is about as narrow as we could make it. It went through House Agriculture, which did spend a lot of time, and I really praise them. They heard a lot of people talk. I met with the Attorney General and, their office, and a lot of this is at their suggestion. Then it went to Judiciary, briefly Ways and Means, but Judiciary. I will say, there was one aspect of the way it came out of the House that I was, not entirely thrilled with. I just want to mention. I believe the only way that we can get to bad actors like this is not by more fines, it's not money, they just don't pay. It's either jails or seizing their equipment. I was saying, Mr. Chair, that I think the best way to get to these bad actors is either by putting them in jail or seizing their equipment. In fact, I think if we did that with one or two, that would the words get around. The jail time is definitely a possibility under the bill as you have it. There were a few people in judiciary who were uncomfortable with seizure. And they eventually, I think the seizure could be this, but they took it out.
The seizure part,
They went out.
if they're kind of operators that we know they are, they probably don't own the equipment either.
Right,
You know, it's, either that or they're behind on their payments, so you'd be seizing something that's really not of any value.
you're right. And that's why the original provision. We met with the community of people here from the state who work on seizures. The original provided that. If the equipment is seized. It can be sold unless someone demonstrates that. Someone else owns the property and they are not related in any way by corporate form or by family with the defendant. They have to show, and they did not know, nor could they have known by an objective standard, how the equipment was going to be used. And if they can't show that, too bad, they don't get it. And I get, it was raised, a member of the committee raised exactly your issue and said, well, what about rental? What if they rent the equipment? And we thought that through and realized that if a rental agency really could show that they had no way of knowing, which is a little unlikely, then they would get the equipment back. But they'd never be able to rent it to these people again. Because their name is on a list, they've been prosecuted and they know. So we felt like, hey, the problem that actually that was in the committee over seizure was. It's a big thing to see, this is big equipment. The AG was saying, I don't know that we would ever do it. And I guess our feeling was, well. Try, you know, all you have to do is do it once, and then the word would get out. But there were a number of people on the committee who felt they just don't like seizure generally. Because they think that the proceeds of seizure go to law enforcement and law enforcement becomes self-motivated. So the way to deal with that, and the chair of the Judiciary Committee, Representative Lalonde, was considering that, is just to provide that the seizure of this kind of, in this situation, goes to the victims. And the proceeds of sale. But it was near the end of the time, it was complicated, and he just thought another time and left it out. I wish personally we hadn't left it out, but aside from that, I'm thrilled that it's gotten this far, and I'd be happy in the future to answer any questions that you might have, either by email or.
Well, I think, you know, I think you're in the right direction. These people, the only thing they really have is time. And if you take the time away from them, they're really not doing well. So, I mean, it's sad to say, but that means put them in jail and take their time away from them. And because most of them, I mean, I've had them come over on my property, but caught it really quick. But they don't have two nickels to rub together. And I mean, you don't gain money out of them. You know, the only thing you can do is, but if you're, you know, older than I and maybe the opposite sex that ends up with the property. I mean, my wife wouldn't be down there, you know, looking after things, and you know, the forester, you can call them, and they'll come, but you kind of just to look at a boundary line. But you've got to know they're there cutting too. Is there anything in the bill where a property owner, when they are cutting, has to notify the abutting landowners?
That's not in the bill. there's protections. There was a concern on the part of a number of the loggers. The professional loggers Northeast wanted to make sure that you couldn't just inadvertently get caught by logging on a logger logging on a neighbor's property because they didn't know where the boundary was. And so what we did is we changed the standard of proof. And really, the most draconian parts of the bill, there are a few draconian parts deliberately. Specifically, if you had 2 strikes, that is 2 fines or judgments that you have not paid. So you have unpaid fines and judgments, at least 2, you can't go on logging unless you post a $500,000, $250,000 bond, or you're working for a legit logging outfit that you don't own and your mom doesn't own and your sister doesn't own.
And that's
That's in the bill, yeah.
right.
Mark, what does it cost to get a $250,000 bond?
It's, I think, probably north of $10,000.
Okay.
So we just don't think, that's not what's gonna happen. But what it does is it means that all these people who have unpaid judgments and unpaid fines, it sweeps them in and says to them, you can't log unless you go work for somebody else. And if you do, it's a crime. So a lot of this was trying to figure out with the AG, how do we tweak things so that it's easier for law enforcement?
So in the bill, like, if there's a violation, it goes to the Attorney General's office, it doesn't go to FPR or the
It's-
state police or.
It's either the AG or state's attorney.
Okay.
I mean, part of the problem, honestly, in the past has been, I mean, some of this, we're gonna have to carry out some education here, because when people call up the state's attorneys, very often they say, well, of course, they're overwhelmed, but they say, this is a civil matter, hire your lawyer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so this is making it very clear, this is a criminal matter. It's fact.
Yeah,
And a lot of it, one woman who testified, well, she's testified about, met exactly your description. She's very elderly, it's a woman. They took $200,000 worth of timber off her land and she received not a dime.
Wow.
So it's,
Okay.
and
there's
the
no
more people
way.
you talk to, it's like you, the more people you talk to, the more people say, you know, that happened to my dad, or you know, that happened to me. It's, I think it's actually a little more pervasive than we know.
Yeah, the only way to kind of prevent that is on all the land from the river to the road, to the other road, and to the road that way, and then you keep them held. But have you ever heard, either of you, of anybody getting paid back for this cutting practice where they just take the wood and run?
Not that I know of.
No.
No one.
I
Did you hear anything?
No, the only judgments that I'm aware of were violations of AMPs where they drop trees into a water body, and the landowner received heavy fines, but the landowner was never reimbursed. I think that this is an important there's a notion of salt in the wound. Let's say you have had your timber stolen in violation of contract, and you have had, maybe for a generation or two, your land in the use value appraisal system, also known as current use, where you all of a sudden you find yourself in violation of an approved forest plan. So your punishment is to have your current use removed. So not only did you get zero for your resource that you've been counting on. Now you lose the tax value saved because you're in violation. And that's what I call it, the salt in the wound. You are double pommeled by these acts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jed, how many generations have to go by before that loss, if you will, is sort of back on track? In other words, trees grow at a certain,
Yeah.
pace. Is it 2, 3, 4, 5 generations? I mean, how long does it take to get it back to where it was?
There are a lot of factors that go into that, but it's multiple generations. You know,
Particularly hardwood, yeah.
Hardwood
And-
can take softwood 30 years, 25, 30.
to a mature merchantable size, it's longer. And there's another factor, when you engage in a contract with a legitimate logger, there are closeout responsibilities. You have to put in infrastructure, water bars, protect soils, other resource, residual stand. And then you have very clear responsibilities and closeout, that the contract's responsible for making sure the main skid roads are open, free of debris, there's no tops near waterways or ravines or property lines, or any number of, in some cases, and this affects, the value, the sunk value landlord would receive, they may want some areas chipped or so there's not a lot of debris. What one of the sadder pieces of this story is, not only did you lose your tax status, did you lose your resource, it was left a mess. And when you have acres and acres of tops that are not lopped, it may take 15 years for them to decompose and be part of the soil. So your woods, you've lost them for recreation, for hiking, for hunting. So the carnage, if you're a victim of this sort of crime, the thief did not have any good intentions in mind. So the damage is, say, permanent, is not in perpetuity, but it's half a century to a century and a quarter to get back to.
So is there anything in the bill, or did the Ag Committee consider a provision, I don't know how to say this the right way, that if the logger brings, in essence, stolen timber to a processor, that processor cannot get paid, or the logger can't get paid until the owner of the timber signs off on it?
Yes, Senator. If I think that Rep. Mahali made a clear decision about, understands the law, adding land fraud and timber trespass to a criminal status. Went through the seizure and forfeiture
Yep.
pieces, which were a disappointment to us as well. But I could go in depth of why it's complicated. You have a 77,000-pound machine. You have to hire a lowboy. You have to store it somewhere. You have to know how to start it, to know how to load it. Very complicated. But to your point, Section 8 of the bill as passed by the House, it's called Implementation, Conditions of Operation. Section 8, it provides the requirement under 13 VSA 3605 that a person convicted of timber trespass, goes on about the penalties and being on basically a black.
I don't see anything after section 4.
Yeah.
We're looking at as passed by the House and we only have 5 seconds. Is that possible? Are you looking at a different version?
Well, how about Attorney General report on timber trespass enforcement?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's section 4, at the
Okay.
bottom of page 9.
Okay. Well, that requires, this is important and to answer your question. requires the Attorney General to submit to the General Assembly a report regarding the current enforcement of timber trespass within the state and potential methods of improving enforcement.
Okay,
The
yeah,
report shall include: one, a summary of the current issues pertaining to enforcement of timber trespass statutes; two, summary of mechanisms or alternatives used in other states to effectively enforce or prevent timber theft or similar crimes; and three, recommendations for programs, policy changes, staffing, and budget estimates to improve enforcement and prevention, ensure consumer protection, and reduce the illegal harvesting, theft, and transporting of timber in the state, including proposed statutory changes to implement these recommendations. So that gives them approximately 1 year to get back. And there were, for instance, members of FPR, Forest, Vermont Woodland Association, Professional Logging Contractors of Vermont, along with states attorneys and attorney generals, participate in the development of a report back as to, rather than get bogged down and this bill die, because it, you know, for Brett Mahaly and frankly for me personally and our committee, our industry, we needed to drive the stake in the ground and give law enforcement tools.
okay.
So that's why there will be professionals that will take a deep dive into all possible ways, whether it's trip tickets or track and trace, you know, where there's a paper trail where that particular load from that property owner went, which I expect in the future will help flesh out the effectiveness. But I do agree with Brett Mahaly, when you get with this bill on a blacklist of 2 strikes of unpaid judgments or fines, you are not able to work. And we spoke to law enforcement, but with state police, or you know the backlog of untried cases. We have a very dysfunctional crisis in the judiciary in our state, and they're saying there are murders, there are wounds, rapes, very violent crimes that take a priority. And I'm sorry, folks, but timber theft or land fraud is on the list, but they're not the top of the list. So that's the reality we live in. And that's why it was so important that this bill in this form was
So you get on the list. How does Mrs. So-and-so find the list? How does a person know where to go to find the list? Who's gonna do the education of getting the word out there?
I just would, Mr. Chair, if I might. There's some value to be that list, but I don't want to exaggerate it. The value is, once you're on the list, no one can rent equipment to you because they either know or should know
Okay,
what's happening, number one. Number two, to get on that list means you can't log anymore yourself. But in terms of the point you made, my personal view is that none of these victims are gonna go look at that list. Some of them don't have internet, much less inclination to use it. So it's valuable. It should be done, and it has a value, but I don't think it will help the individual. The only thing that's gonna help the individuals is to get these people out of doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
and
I've turned it into a law and order.
but
that's
Yeah.
okay.
That's what I am, yeah.
I've made the point that the 2 organizations in Vermont that are leaders in the forest products and logging industry have both unanimously supported this effort. Nobody wants this kind of black mark on their industry that, and FPR is aware of it, and they, education, whether it's Vermont Woodlands Magazine, the Northern Logger, which, is published by Northeastern Logger Association. There are articles about this. It's not, but the education piece is, there may be recommendations in this report on timber trespass enforcement and recommendations that come forth if this becomes law.
Yeah, my only suggestion in asking the question was, if I'm a bad actor and I know I'm not gonna get paid until the owner of that timber signs off on it, it might make me hesitate. That's all, but I'm sure you'll consider that.
Well, you know, frankly, it's not just the viciousness, but as Rep. Mahaly said, these folks are clever. They might ship these logs to one yard, put them on another truck. Some go to Canada, some go to out of state, and
Or forge your signature on the.
or,
Yeah.
and, the depth of crime is not shallow. It's
That's a very interesting suggestion. Actually, fairly early on in the drafting, we were kind of attracted by the idea of requiring that the lumberyards, that the sawmills themselves not do something where they couldn't pay these guys. And we realized we are too small a state. They just go to New Hampshire or Canada, and they already do, and they split the loads up.
Yeah.
So we thought about that. I think it would be great if we were a little bigger, maybe,
Of course,
self-contained.
this whole practice has gone on forever. They leave your property with, say, 32 logs on the load, get to the mill and only have 28. 4 fell off someplace. I mean,
It's crazy.
it's not good. And,
Thank you. I'm gonna go over to the
yeah,
other committee and see.
well, if we
I'm happy to help if you're,
we need more advice with,
if Linda texts me or emails me, I'll make sure one way or another to get back. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Craig Bell.
Thank you.
Um, So,
yeah,
so the Attorney General is gonna be the one that would be in charge of where you file your complaint to them. What about Forest and Parks? Are they mixed up in this bill?
I won't say regrettably not, but they don't have the capacity, experience. They are not licensed law enforcement. The law enforcement agency that possibly had the ability and skill set and power were Fish and Wildlife. They do not have the specific training in these violations. So the buck was passed all over the state. And it would have taken setting up a new division. As you know, they're under siege, just trying to do their own good work in the state. So
Well, I'm too busy. I have way too much to do already. I mean, heard that excuse forever.
but this,
But they're the professionals. Every county, I believe, if not every region, has a force.
there's a county for it.
And, if some elderly person has been let off in plain English, I would think that they could almost find time to go in and measure the stumpage. I mean, you can tell if a log's been cut in the last few months. Somebody's gotta measure the stumpage to know that can verify it. That can give some numbers. The AG doesn't anybody that can do measure stumps. Some of these people don't even have a forester on the payroll. So they can't have their own do it, and if they did have their own do it, then it could be questioned that they had a self-interest to exaggerate or to get the thing higher. So I would think your county forester goes in there non-biased to measure up the stumps and know the footage. So you'd have in the value of the product, whether it's hardwood, softwood, maple, birch.
Senator, you know, common sense and rational thinking, you know, don't necessarily apply here, because county foresters, when they are approached, they say, well, this is not our authority. We do not have the time, the expertise. We're not being paid to go down the rabbit hole of inventorying and building the case. I've heard this so many times. Professional foresters that actually may be familiar with it find it, well, my time's expensive, who's gonna pay for building this case, and showing up in court, testifying, getting a judgment, getting no resolution.
Yep.
Coming back, one of these landowners who testified said after 5.5 years, he finally got a judgment. The perpetrator didn't show up. And after the second time of not showing up, he says, well, what do you want me to do? Find them in contempt of court? And the landlord says, yes. Well, he said, if you're gonna do that, it's gonna cost you this much for court fees to schedule it. And by the way, 5.5 years and multiple court appearances have taken place. So the justice is not there.
Yeah.
And do you think the county forester system might have that capacity? It being rational thinking, you might, but it isn't playing with that.
Of course, I was thinking if a cutter had to be registered, you know, a person that's in the cutting room had to be registered through the state, they'd be issued a number. When they go to sell the log to a buyer, that number would have to be on the slip, that the scale slip or the sales slip. Did you talk about anything like that?
We did.
And was that bad or?
There were so many different options, call that a track and trace or a trip
Yeah.
ticket. Many of the mills I bring into, I will go to a box, all up truckers, I truck my own wood generally. Fill it out, landowner, species, my name, trucker's name, it's the same. And that trip ticket number will follow the scale slip all down. Getting a consensus on the various options of how to keep track so fraud cannot occur was a longer and hotly contested debate. It takes a lot of stakeholders. But that's why I keep going back to this of operation and the Attorney General report on timber trust enforcement. implores them or requires them to look at any and all, including enforcement systems that have been in use in other abutting states and other parts of the Northeast, and report back.
Are there any other, you mentioned one other state that, Maine, that has like a timber trespass?
So they do. But state of Maine has, they're called state forests. They the state foresters. And they require licenses. And these foresters, you know, are carry firearms, have arrest authority, and a way another level of enforcement. There's not one or two to cover the state. They're everywhere. It's a big industry, and we financially, or just the structure of FPR is not, we are so far not there. We've got a lot of bureaucracy, and we're not, there's a lot of pressure on state lands, how they're managed, to what interest groups, benefits, et cetera, and they are working hard and operating the numerous state parks and state forests, expanding them to, so they're not equipped at this time in history to move into that level of enforcement. Just, that's the reality. They have a lot of responsibilities.
Well, I think we've got quite a lot of
Yeah.
lifting to do to get this ready for prime time. Are there some loggers? We've got some coming, later. We wanted to get you folks in, you know, early on that.
Well, I could
But
show you our witness list or tell you about it, but
Well,
there was a Orange County logger, Lincoln, on timber harvesting testified.
yeah, we got
One log.
anchors coming and, you know, that's something that I hadn't even thought about. I mean, if you're a lending agency and you take a mortgage, somebody needs a bunch of money, so they mortgage their land. And, you know, it's worth so much because of timber on it. Then a hijacker gets the timber and you're still using that land to support your mortgage and you lose that.
Well, you have quite a witness list
Yeah.
here. I'm familiar with virtually everyone on that list.
Enough to get.
They're all serious professionals. I would keep, and you've got victims, you've got foresters, you've got bankers, you've got a great bunch.
Yeah.
You've got commissioners. I would leave you with a simple idea that it's important, I think, for our industry and our forests that this does not die on the wall without any action. There are provisions, and I think you'll get testimony from these of all the stakeholders that are going to be on that committee. Yeah, it can make this a more perfect bill, or certainly better. But to do nothing is to be would be very sad and to me negligent in moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
Chairman. If there are no other questions, I know you've got a lot of.
Yeah, I'll touch it. Thank you.
yeah, thanks
Thank
for
you.
getting that over to us, and you also sent us a bunch of other stuff that would have been just as well if it stayed with you.
I rest my case. That's why I'm here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.